In this video, you'll get a list of the topics you're most likely to get questions about on the GED Reasoning through Language Arts, or RLA test. I'm going to give you some practical tips to hopefully help you pass faster and score higher to help you move ahead. And one thing you'll have to know about is main ideas versus supporting ideas. Now, the main idea is the most important idea that the writer wants to communicate, and the supporting details are the facts and examples that support the main idea. You'll also have to know about restating and summarizing. Now, restating means to explain something in your own words, and summarizing means to explain something by picking out what you think are the most important points. So you'll also want to know how to read passages and work on applying ideas from the passages to answer questions. So that's a good thing to practice ahead of time through practice tests or if you're using a textbook. You'll also have to know about comparing and contrasting. Now, comparing just means to look at two things and think about how they're similar, and contrasting means to look at how two things are different. So you also have to know about cause and effect. A cause tells you why something happened, and an effect tells you the results. You'll also have to know about word choice. Now, the key here is that the writer of a passage has to make decisions about the words that they use. Now, some words might have a negative connotation, which means that it may cause you to have a negative image or feeling when you read these words, and others may give you a positive feeling or a positive image while you're reading, and that would be a positive connotation. Now, some words won't give you much of a good feeling or a bad feeling. They'll just be neutral, which would be what we'd call a neutral connotation. All right, and so also under the category of word choice would be figurative language. Now, figurative language includes things like similes, metaphors, and personification. A simile is used to compare two things using the words like or as. A metaphor compares things without using the words like or as. All right, and I've talked about similes, metaphors, and also personification in other videos, so I'll put a link to that down below. You'll also have to know about recognizing conclusions. And a conclusion is when you put information together from the passages in order to help you figure something out. So basically, a type of question you might get about this would be to read the passage and then just figure out what's the conclusion. All right. So you also have to be able to recognize generalizations. And a generalization, if you're not sure what it is, it's basically just a broad statement. So I have a cat named Tommy. If I were to look at my cat and say, well, my cat sleeps all day, and if I were to then just assume that all other cats everywhere sleep all day, that would be a generalization. There's also the concept of point of view. Now, the point of view is the position that the author is writing from. Tone is also important, and a writer's tone is basically just the attitude that they have about a certain topic or subject, right? So some examples of tones could be formal or informal, or again, it could be a positive tone or a concerned or an upset tone. So that's just something you'll want to think about, and you might get questions on tone. All right, so text structure is also important in the nonfiction section. So basically, in the nonfiction writing section, or in any nonfiction piece of writing, I should say, the writer has to decide how to present the information to the reader so that it accomplishes their goals. And the two big ways that they can do this are using examples or using something like a pros and cons list, right? Also, other types of text structure that might come up would be chronology. So they might say first, this happened, second, this will happen, etc., etc. Then they'll say last. They also can use elaboration. So elaboration is basically when an author adds more details to give a more complete explanation of something. Now, if you've seen my video on purpose of text, I basically started saying a pine to help people remember that, or remember the pine. And so the purposes of the text would be to persuade, to inform, to narrate, or entertain. You'll also have to be able to use graphics along with the text to answer questions. So you might get a passage that has like a circle graph or a chart with it, and that's just something that comes with practice. Now, you're also going to want to know about arguments. And you might read a piece where an author takes a position on an issue. And when an author takes a position, we would call that making an argument. And now the conclusion is basically just the ultimate statement that the writer's making. The evidence is support for why they believe what they believe in their argument. And the premises are just the assumptions that the writer is making behind the argument. So a clue for the conclusion would be the word therefore. So if you see the word therefore, that can often be a clue about what the conclusion is. So another skill would be thinking about how valid an argument is. For an argument to be considered valid, there has to be evidence to support it. And To determine this, you have to look at the facts, the data, any examples provided, any testimonials from authority figures or causes, and you're going to have to think critically to decide if an argument's valid. Okay, so another skill would be putting information together from different sources. A fairly common example would be you'll have like an email alongside of a news story about the same topic. Along the same lines, you have to be able to analyze text with opposing arguments, right? So one person believes one thing, another person believes another, and you'll have to be able to look at both of their arguments. Moving more in depth into what you should expect on the fiction section, you might have to know about plot and plot elements. So the plot is just the events that happen in a story. The conflict is the problem in the story. The characters are obviously the people in the story, and the narrator is just a fancy word for the person that's actually telling the story. All right, so you also have to make inferences. And so all an inference is would be educated guesses based on your own experience and information in the story. So theme is just the big message of the story that the writer wants you to take away. And sometimes in good cases, the theme will just be told to you directly, but you may also have to infer it. Now, we already, like I said, we talked a little bit about point of view already in the nonfiction section, but we talked about it as the position that an author is taking on an issue. Whereas for fiction, you may also have to think about point of view in terms of whether the author is writing from first person or second person or third person. Okay, so next we have the writing and grammar. And something really important would be the knowing about complete sentences and how to tell a fragment or an incomplete sentence from a complete sentence. Now, you should know that a complete sentence is going to have a subject and a verb, sometimes more than one. And so just be aware of the difference between the two. And also know that a simple sentence is also called an independent clause. So a simple sentence is just going to have a subject and a verb and express a complete thought. And coordinating conjunctions join those independent clauses together. All right, so again, I'm not going to go into all of that here in this video, but something to keep in mind here. Punctuation rules are also important, and these are important for the essay, which I'll talk about shortly, but these are also important for the multiple choice section. So just knowing when to use periods, question marks, exclamation points, definitely comma rules are important, which brings me to run-on sentences and comma splices. So just know that a run-on sentence, basically it has two independent clauses combined without the correct punctuation, and a comma splice, you have two sentences that are joined with a comma when there should be a coordinating conjunction after the comma. Modifiers are also important to know about. Modifiers are words that add descriptive details, but when they're put in the wrong place, it could alter the meaning of the sentence completely. There's also parallel structure, and that's something you'll want to know about. You'll also want to know about using apostrophes. So for example, if I show you the two phrases here, the cat's food versus the cat's food. So just be aware of those differences. And you'll just want to know about paragraphs, and basically a paragraph is just a set of sentences. Then you'll have that topic sentence in the first sentence usually, then the remaining sentences are just going to provide additional supporting details. Transition words or phrases are also important to be able to identify, and these are words like however, in contrast, words and phrases like in contrast, on the other hand, yet, but, and although. One quick tip for the essay is to try to put these words in your essay, because the essay is actually graded by a computer algorithm. As long as you do them and put them in the right places throughout your essay, these words are definitely going to help boost your score. If you're interested in that, I would highly recommend you go watch my guide and tutorial for the GED essay.